back. So, all right, so you are now back in New York, which you've been looking at for days now. And now you are back. So this is still Niagara Falls, but the New York side. And you might notice that when it came to tourism, they kind of gave up. So, you know, it's not exactly the same. There's that Days Inn that's full of all the people that don't get across the border. That's pretty much the purpose of the hotels over here. But they do have a casino for the Seneca Indians. There's our shift change right there going in. For the Seneca Indians, they have a casino over here. About 50,000 people live in Niagara Falls, New York. About 83,000 live in Niagara Falls, Ontario. And believe it or not, there are people that do that border crossing every day, back and forth to go to work. Can you believe that? I think I would move. But anyway, in Canada combined. So actually, even though it's only one facility, it has more power generation than what's going on in Canada. And as we get to the upper Niagara River, I'm going to point out to you the towers that regulate the intake of the water. You know how we talked about that, you know, obviously our biggest ally in North America, but at the last minute, John D. Rockefeller in New York City donated the land that the UN is on at First Avenue on the east side of Manhattan. So that is why it ended up in New York City and not on the other side of the state where we are, at the extreme. And then we will come off the island. Again, you'll have the upper Niagara River skirting around both sides of that island. And then we'll be heading towards Buffalo or something, an unbelievable amount of wings, because that's the restaurant that came up with the buffalo sauce recipe. Now, coming up on your right, you're going to see these towers that have like black vertical lines. Okay, they're coming up. You can see them already if you're at the front of the coach. Those are the intake towers that regulate the amount of water that is going into this facility anyway. And the Robert Moses Power Plant is off to your left-hand side, and obviously a major employer in the area, along with some of the other industry you're going to see up here. Here's the intake towers right here. Now, I'm not an engineer. I will say I have it on my list to figure out how this works, because I don't know how in the world they do that. You know? But slowly but surely I learn about the things I'm curious about. That's kind of next on my list for this area, to figure out how do they decide to take out the water, where does it go, and how do they do that. But I'm not very scientifically minded, so sometimes it takes me a while to wrap my head around. It's the second largest city in New York State. Obviously New York City's number one with 8 million people. Buffalo only has 250,000. Huge difference. You know, the city that I grew up in had over 1 million people. So 250 is not that much to be the second largest city in the state. Buffalo in this area gets a ton of snow in the winter. Have you guys ever heard of lake effect snow? No? Okay, so we've got these Great Lakes, specifically Lake Erie, as at one side of Buffalo. And as the snow is up to the first floors in Boston, like we told you, in 2014 was a really bad year, pretty bad as well. And in Buffalo, people had snow up to their roofs of their house. The roofs. And that amount of snow is unfathomable to even me, okay, because I don't live somewhere like that. This river does freeze. Now I told you that the American Falls stopped flowing on purpose because the Corps of Engineers water was flowing over Niagara River into the Niagara River. Can you believe that? I mean, so literally just over time there was no more water in this river, and no water went over Horseshoe Falls. It was crazy. So now today what they do, because that would impact the hydropower, they break up the ice. They have icebreaker technology at the mouth of Lake Erie. It breaks up the ice.
something? Are they seekers?
Now the Germans came here and they said this looks like Germany, so we're going to stay. They did. They didn't know it at the time, but this is the best soil in America. Down here on the left.
The Amish people are so-called soul of the earth. And I'm not saying that we are, I'm just saying that we're supposed to be. If we go back to Genesis, the beginning of the Bible, why we soon realized that man was driven out of the Garden of Eden out on the land, and there he was to...
My great-grandfather purchased this farm. And even when I started, I wasn't sure, if I wanted to do this. I wouldn't recommend it to young guys who aren't married. I certainly wouldn't be at it for 25 or 30 years like I am now without having a wife and children.
Now electricity does the chores for the farmer's wife.
If a technology is necessary, then okay, that's one thing. But if it's making life more convenient and making life easier, that doesn't seem like a real good reason to get something. In fact, working hard and having our time taken up in labor as opposed to leisure, well, that's probably the better way to err.
It was just after World War II. They were pacifists, so they hadn't gone into the army. Their neighbors had lost sons in the war. So they didn't like them because they didn't go to war. They didn't like them because they didn't want paved roads. They didn't like them because they didn't want electricity. And electricity was just coming into this rural area. And they didn't like them because they didn't want telephones. And if your neighbors would get a telephone, it didn't cost you as much to have a telephone line, and they wouldn't do that. So
I love this country. We're a country of great people. But the kingdom of heaven comes first. So this trend in America, love America, leave it, wave the flag. The flag is fine, but we're the only nation in the world that worships the flag. It's weird. It's very easy.
Then took the boys, there was exactly 15 boys there between 6 and 13. He let them leave. Within 20 minutes of that call, we had troopers surrounding the school. They were just breaking down the front door, and that's when the shooter looked and saw that the trooper was coming through the window and was going to kill him. He turned the gun on himself, but he had already shot every single one of those girls.
It was about 11:15 when we found out about what. Those 5 hours were a very long time to not know whether our daughter was alive or not.
The families were obviously very distraught, not knowing where their children were, where their children had ID on them. And they had things that children wear in public schools. I mean, even the young ones now have cell phones and backpacks and things, and these children did not have anything like that. There was no way to even begin to try to identify them.
The hardest part was coming home and telling the ones at home that she's gone.
We have identified the suspect. We have a positive ID on him. His name is Charles Carl Roberts IV. He's 32 years of age.
And one of the things that I share with people who I've been able to talk with is that, in a sense, Grace walked in the door. And with Grace walking in the door, Hope walked in the door. And we didn't know it at the time, but that's what happened.
I placed the situation in God's hands and just accept that this is the way it was. And I choose not to hold it against Charles because it really doesn't help me anything anyway.
For me, it was like unloading baggage. It was just like, wow, I don't need to deal with this. This is God's territory.
Because all of Amish life is structured around rituals of giving up, of self-surrender. I think for many of the rest of us, forgiveness is a hard thing because we think it's unnatural, because it's so unlike anything else we do. We're all trained to never give up anything. For Amish people, it's hard, but it's not unnatural.
Obviously, sometimes we would like to say to God, you made a mistake.
Get a building permit. Here's the file, go do it. And I'm like, what? So I had the file, I drove up to Morristown, and I met with a young man up there, his name was Andy Miller. I pulled up to the courthouse, and there were 50 horses.
The need for smoke detectors and now carbon monoxide detectors. That's putting your faith in a man-made device instead of God. What God wants to happen will happen. The Amish are building their homes according to the way their ordinance says they have to build. If, heaven forbid, a fire comes, sweeps through the house, and something terrible happens, the child will be in a better place. The people will be in a better place. They'll be with God. Theirs is not an intellectual faith. It's it's a lived faith in a very real way, because everything they do is guided by their word, by for the Amish. There's this real sense that persecution comes as a kind of test of the faith. The world wants us to chain together, and they were taught by a public school teacher. We changed. We changed. We began to consolidate schools. We began to lengthen the school year and to raise the age at which you could leave school.
For the Amish, education should be practical. It was important to learn to read, to write, to spell, to do some arithmetic.
And that's what you go through the 8th graders to get. The book learning is important, the schooling is important, but it's values that you get at home, working with your parents. That's the most important.
We can travel by horse and buggy, have the old ways of doing things, and still.
Okay, we are getting close to our lunch stop. You guys hungry? A little bit? Didn't snack too much, did you? Alright, we are coming into Williamsport, PA, or Pennsylvania. Williamsport, we're going to a place called Wegmans. WEGMAN''S. It's a policy of the store. And so restrooms are at the front of the store. Once you go into the side entrance, there's 2 sets of restrooms up towards the front of the store. And yeah, so that is kind of what we're doing for lunch. This town is Williamsport. It is known for one thing, and one thing only. And that is the Little League World Series. You guys heard of little types playing baseball, right? So up to 12 years old, they come here in August. The teams from around the world, and I do mean around the world, Caribbean, Japan, lots of people will be out doing their shopping. But the teams will come here and have lunch because, you know, it's easy for everybody to find something that they like. Last year, Japan won the World Series. So anyway, this is Wegmans, brown building here. And we have the coach parking kind of in the back. It is a Saturday, lots of people will be shopping, so just be aware of the traffic. Yet we consider him a cute little statue. So they took the 4 corners and kind of made it like a little bit of a baseball diamond. Because you have in the middle, there's an emblem. If you're on the left-hand side, my side of the coach, that's like the pitching mound. And then you've got them batting, you've got them out in the outfield here at all 4 corners. There's the batter. And then, you know, first, second, third base around the intersection. I think it's quite cute. And up here, as we get on the main road, you're going to see a river. This one is the Susquehanna River. Susquehanna River. This is the river that you will see the entire rest of the day. It goes 444 miles from the Chesapeake Bay through the state of Maryland, into Pennsylvania, where you are now. It even has a spoke of the river that goes off and goes up into New York State. It's the longest river east of the Mississippi River. It is not navigable by commercial boat, only pleasure boats, and that's because it's too shallow. And that's what Susquehanna means, with shallow, broad river. Pennsylvania, I have been for a little while, but I didn't want to interrupt the video to tell you about the state. This state has an unusual nickname. The nickname is the Keystone State. And there's a couple of different, here it doesn't look like that anymore. It's amazing how fast Daniel's grown up in the last few years, going to his house. But anyway, you know, that's him. That's demonstrating what they call the quillo, which is a quilt that turns into a pillow. want to watch this again. But I'll tell you something about Daniel, because he's a good example of what is probably the hardest part of the Amish culture to accept as Westerners. And that is the education ending at 8th grade. Okay, and people always ask me, how old are they when they're in 8th grade? They're 13, maybe 14 on the upper scale when they're getting out of school. I mean, that's it. That's the end of the one-room schoolhouse. There's no more. Kind of either away from home or still at home, but have more like adult jobs as we would perceive it. So it's kind of interesting seeing an Amish kid go through that transition. And all I can really do is explain to you what I've seen through him. But he is exceptional. I mean, we're talking about a 9-year-old kid that got up in front of groups like you and talked to you like any adult would, with no ums, no shyness, anything. I mean, Amish kids are way beyond the maturity of children that you guys are used to. So you're actually...
How hard will it be?
Have to agree to their list of things. Yes, it's rare, but it does happen. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a couple of requirements. I'll talk about that to everybody, because I get that question. Okay. That one is the newest. I've heard. No, there was one that opened. Now that we're getting into the museum process. I mean, the Empire State Building always has a line. Just because it's the Empire State Building. Yeah, it can have a line. Yeah. Oh, you cute little children, let me take pictures of you. So what we say is when we're having the dinner inside the mother-in-law apartment, most people would say, you know, their faith, their spouse, their parents, their friends, like that. So it just takes a while to get used to what is approved and what is... So I don't know. So they do have forms of electricity. They have like propane generators and things like that. So they have like propane gas. They'll explain, you know, they have a woodworking shop that has equipment that has to, you know, have power. They have battery lights. They have these huge battery packs for lights. So it's not like they're going by candlelight, you know. It's just that they just don't have it hooked up on the grid. And just not to ask them. So a lot of these families have 10, 13 kids. They have 6, which is a lot. But there's families that are a lot bigger. And then people want to know about birth control. Okay, well, you figure it out. Their perception would be that those are gifts from God. Little blessings from God. That would be their outlook. So, you know, that does contribute to them having large families. Do they get divorced? It's very rare, very hard. Yeah, they would go through a series of counseling and other things, and that would be like the absolute storied ranch kind of house. We're out in kind of a suburb right here. And it could just look like a house that you and me or anybody else would live in. And it could be an Amish person. And all they do is just not hook the electricity up to the grid or use the electricity in the house. Okay? So not every Amish person is living out, living in tents. And if you had 13 kids, you'd have a big house too, right? So I mean, their houses are pretty substantial because they need the room. But when you go inside, they're really plain. And you'll see that tomorrow when we tour an example of an Amish house. So tonight we will not be going in their house. You see the outside of it, but you know, we don't go on the inside. But you can see their barn and their animals and their buggies and their woodworking shop and gift store and mother-in-law apartment and all of that. Pretty much everywhere except their personal house we have access to. So the Mennonites have a little bit more liberty. They do use some technology, more technology. They have phones, they have tractors. Some of them have cars, some of them do not. That just kind of depends on their personal viewpoints. Mennonite decorations. Do you guys do that? You buy the stocks? We'll buy the stocks. People will decorate their homes with them, put up like scarecrow decorations and pumpkins and things like that. They'll call it something like that. And they'll get together, the families will get together and play games and things like that. They're not doing trick-or-treating and that kind of stuff. That would be considered pagan, but they do have fall festivals and they're really big here. Here's on the left, huge horse. So just keep your eyes peeled. It looks like they're building a house back there. Okay, so that is a Mennonite farm. Why? Because it has tractors and more industrialized equipment. So that one is not Amish. Oh, here's one, convertible buggy. It'll end up being on the left. Lots of dairy farms out here. Actually, there's probably more dairy farms than anything else. You just see the crops a little bit more prominently. Alright, something's coming up here on the left. Covered bridge is coming up on our left as well. Okay, this is Madison County. Alright, here's an Amish guy to the right. We've got something on this trailer. Most of the farmers have multiple sources of income. You know, if they have cattle, they still have a small cornfield, a vegetable garden, maybe do jams or jellies, canning that they'll sell, you know, in their little market stalls around the road, because the tourists come and just drive around the areas like this. I've been on this tour before.
With the Magi bend the knee and worship him who came to die. Holy wrath that we deserved, he would bear at Calvary. Through the Son, the living Word. Say